So without further ado, what I want to do is introduce our next topic, which is going to be led by Simeon Oriko, who is from the Mojaloop Foundation as our Director of Community. He's going to lead a panel discussion on why folks should contribute to the Mojaloop project. And with us today, we have two very active community members. We have Warren Carew, who is VP of Payment Solutions at ModusBox. He's in the UK. He's also our delegate, ModusBox's delegate on the Technical Governing Board. Fellow TGB rep is Greg McCormick from Sybrin. He's Chief Strategic Business Officer at Sybrin, and he's calling in from South Africa. So welcome, gentlemen. I'll turn it over to Simeon and the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula, and welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to have both Greg and Warren. For context, like we said at the beginning of today's sessions, the community is made up of many individuals and organizations, and who contribute in very different way towards the entire development and the build of the Mojaloop Foundation. And so this session is primarily targeted at those of you in our audience who have businesses or organizations and is trying to figure out how can we meaningfully contribute to the Mojaloop project? What benefits does that have for us? Can we get a couple of examples? Well, today we present to you two. We've got Greg from Sybrin and Warren from ModusBox. I think I will let Greg, you start off first with your presentation, and then after that we can pass it over to Warren. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Simeon. Yeah, not really a presentation, more of a talk, since this is really kind of a panel. But I thought what I'd first start off with is to give you a little bit of history of Sybrin, so it'll help you understand a lot of our decision-making processes and why Mojaloop is a good fit for what we do. So let's start off with that. You know, we're an African-based provider of payment banking solutions to banks, central banks, and other financial institutions. We've been doing this for over 30 years now. We are based in South Africa. We're originally based in Zimbabwe. You know, one of the things that you have to understand about us is what really defined Sybrin in the early days was something called check truncation, which was basically the digitalization of the whole process. And we implemented the third system in the world and the first on the continent. And that really drove everybody to us. Now, obviously, checks aren't where it's at anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. But the point it was phenomenal new technology that took things in new directions. And so a couple of years ago, we went looking for that next, check truncation type of solution that would help the company, move into the future, grow again at the dramatic growth rates that we had when check truncation came about. And we were looking at what we were doing. We already had solutions for SWIFT and ACH, RTGS, and a lot of other proprietary systems. We did have no card switch. That wasn't a space that we played in. But after we looked at things, we decided that instant payments was, the target area that we needed to focus on. And in particular, we needed to focus on inclusivity when it came with that. So then we had to make the decision, do we build or do we buy? Obviously, based on our experience, in history, we have the skills to do either one of those. And as we were exploring our options, we found Mojaloop. We decided that it was a good hybrid model because it really is kind of a build and a buy. So here was something where we could do both. Share the build with the community on what was needed in the core Mojaloop product, and wrap the Mojaloop product with and solution with our own framework, and deliver a solution that keeps the cost down with all the open source elements, and yet provides everything by adding our own components around that. So to us, Mojaloop is basically a rail, the way we look at it, in our payment hub. But that rail can be just Mojaloop. So Mojaloop can be the center of everything, and that's the only thing that we're putting in is Mojaloop. But it can also ideally sit alongside with ACH, SWIFT, or anything else, any additional rail. So for our central banking and clearinghouse customers that use us for ACH and everything else, they can use us then to manage the Mojaloop framework for instant payments. So the nice thing is it can all be managed consistently from one central tool, which is our payment hub. And we admit our approach is a little bit different than others in that we're not like pure open source, but it's good to have that variety of available for the hub operators. So that's kind of the history of what brought us to Mojaloop and into the open source fold, if you will. And now I kind of want to talk about some of the benefits that we get from this. The number one is knowing that we're helping with financial inclusion. That means a lot to me in particular. I'm rather dedicated to this project and what we're doing. I like to tell people I've kind of drank the Kool-Aid, if you will. It's a great mission, and it's also important to everybody at Sybrin as a whole. So we feel really good about what we're doing along those lines. One of the other things that's nice is if you notice, this is an interesting community. It's literally some of the brightest people in the industry, lots of new ideas. You're really working with people that are at the cutting edge of technology and looking when it's safe to bring those things forward. So we really like that. It's also about the sharing of design patterns and the technology, again, all those emerging ideas. It helps keep us fresh and keeps us in the middle of things. But what's interesting is that we can pick what we want to focus on and let others do what we don't want to do, right? So that helps us, optimize our resources and everything else. But it's not just about, thinking about, the right person for the right task. It's not that kind of thing. It's literally maximizing the effort and the spend on what we find is most important to us and doing so both inside Mojaloop and outside. So we can really focus on those things that offer us the best return on effort and return on investment. And I think that's critical for anybody that's working with this. It gives you an extended, larger team, and you can spread your resources farther. It also lets us focus on what we want to commercially support. So, items that are donated are supported by the community and therefore require less effort on our part to support. It allows us to pick and choose what makes the most sense for us and spreads our own support investments farther along. So this is a really big thing to us. Kind of another thing I want to bring up here is something that I guess should have been expected, but was a nice unexpected circumstance that happened. You wind up broadening your horizons and broadening your connections. Microsoft and Sybrin were working in the same large South African bank. We're both doing different focuses. They were working with an innovation center, if you will, how to spread innovation across Africa. And we were working with mostly the global markets group and on Forex. After we started talking, we realized that we both had Mojaloop in the middle of what we were doing. And so we decided to pool our resources. And as a result, this is actually a really cool thing and good for the community. We'll be fine-tuning Mojaloop to run on Azure, and we'll be donating those templates back to the community. And this will include things like modifying the implementation so that we're using the Azure API gateway. We're using all the Azure data resources. We're obviously using Azure Kubernetes as we do this. And some of those templates will be things like this: an open source only, use at your own risk version, a supported version with Sybrin's payment hub and tools, and eventually versions that will include the open source fraud transactional monitoring system that is being developed right now. So we'll keep expanding those things. We'll also be producing templates that will work with the Azure Edge devices, so they can be managed from the cloud but maintain the data and the systems in the country, which for some countries is critical. They won't allow certain types of banking data to actually leave the country. So this will help us get around issues of data governance. It's a big deal. So another thing that we're doing at the moment is we're involved in a POC, for the same organization that's using WhatsApp as the interface to Mojaloop and core banking systems as well as setups for DFSPs. And the work right now does not use PISP in its first release, but we will adopt that, and we're assuming that portions of that work will then be contributed back to the community, because it's going to help us all. It's going to help us just as much as it will help other people. But we've had to kind of get going with that, so we already had something rolling without PISP, and we'll get into that portion. One of the other things I'd like to mention is that Sybrin will be focusing on adding more merchant capability to Mojaloop, working with our new sister company, Payout, and we'll also be focusing on helping with the Forex capability and the next version of that within Mojaloop. After having said all that, so why is Mojaloop important to Sybrin, and why do we support and contribute? Well, first off, it is our instant payment switch. We don't have another one. We're completely, dedicated to this and this path. And so for us, it's important to keep it healthy and supported. Therefore, it's important to us financially. And, frankly, we also like the mission of financial inclusion. So it's good for the company and good for the employees. The employees feel like they're doing something of import. And it's mutually beneficial in many ways and provides many options for business models. We keep discovering, new business models. We're working on some remittance processing things. We're not just looking at central switches, which is important, and yes, we support them. But we're looking at things like, how do we do a centralized switch that's actually an entire merchant ecosystem for a region, for example. We'll see if we can pull that off. And I conversely would say then, why should Mojaloop be important to you, and why should you contribute? It's really for the same reasons, right? It's a business model. It's allowing you to spread your resources farther. Frankly, it's got good momentum. It's in the right space at the right time as far as instant payments, interoperable instant payments, and working on that inclusivity problem. So, as it's becoming to us, and as it has been with us, it can become an important piece of your solution, your finances, and your identity and mission. And I'll kind of get off my high horse now and either let Simeon ask me a question or two, or switch over to Warren.
No, thanks so much, Greg. I think that's particularly useful. There are a couple of interesting highlights that you gave that I can see that you may want to respond to in the chat, but I'll pass it over to Warren. Warren, when you're ready.
Thanks, Simeon and Greg. So I'll take a similar approach. I'll just give you a bit of background on ModusBox and where we are with things. So we're a global software company that we deliver equitable and inclusive financial services through real-time participation. Now, historically, ModusBox has two strands of DNA, and they've come together in this Mojaloop space. We come from a digital transformation world, and we come from a disruptive financial inclusion services world. And this has really led us to appreciate, understand, and adopt the level 1 principles around financial inclusion done right. And that means to avoid the worst of the unforeseen consequences that we've seen in some other initiatives, and good, well-meaning efforts. I think in our breakout session, somebody mentioned, and in fact, Costa mentioned monopolies. We've all been, or a lot of us have been part of, in sometimes forming those monopolies. So within Mojaloop, we find this kind of intersection of both those principles and the technical solutions that help deliver that. And I'll share with you some of our experiences that we've had both as supporting hub operators with the core Mojaloop product, some of the work we've been doing with the participation of financial institutions busy connecting to those services. And finally, I'll touch a bit on how we see this as a sustainable business model, because ultimately this is a business. Now, we joined in the efforts with the Gates Foundation early in 2017, and were part of the team and a consortium that made the first Mojaloop POC. There were a number of core mobile money providers, fintech organizations, and it was a great initiative and announcement to the world. In 2018, actually, the real effort took off when we started looking with commercial partners and institutional partners that were actually looking to adopt the solution. Some of them are like our friends from Mojaloop. As a community at that time, we had an hypothesis going into programs that most adopters would have been either existing hub operators or running some kind of RTP solution. And therefore, we focused on an API-led design for Mojaloop that would be easily adoptable by those other organizations. That wasn't entirely the case. It is, in fact, the case that that Greg's describing, though, which is great to see that those design decisions were right, and I do believe they were right. But a lot of what we've experienced have actually been that we've had greenfield situations, often driven by the fact that even in the place where people were using the services, the central banks or the national operators, they couldn't actually adopt a new piece of technology because of the legacy solutions or proprietary solutions that they had in the past that were not open for expansion. And that brings us to why the open source model is so effective here. Those long in the tooth software solutions are just simply not designed for this kind of modern world of interoperability in many cases. So for new organizations that, like Mojaloop, they needed to actually have a clean field to start from, and they needed to operate independently. They needed a complete solution that they could rely on. So together with them, we developed MVP. In this case, it was minimal viable product rather than lovable product, but we'll get to that. That allowed them to actually use the core Mojaloop platform and had a finance portal around it, which was sufficient to get them to go live. From that experience, we knew where we wanted to get to, but it was a question of resources. How do you actually scale up? There's a lot of things to do. As Greg said, it's about how you use your resources. So that is where having the benefit of the Mojaloop community is so important, because we were able to leverage the next program to actually build on that. And working with UNCDF and partners in Myanmar, and contributions from other philanthropic organizations. Gates is still supporting some of the activities around the business operations framework. We're actually evolving the finance portal version 2 that provides that complete solution, provides something that adopters can look at and understand and appreciate as being a viable solution for them. Importantly, we're doing that without disrupting the ability for Sybrin or Mythos or actually, in fact, anybody else who does have a modern solution to be able to integrate the core switching technology in it. So we're getting the best of both worlds. Mojaloop led the way in what was required in the finance portal. The challenge was taken up by the subsequent adopters of it. And by this finance portal work happening in the open source, it's providing great payback for Mojaloop for the pains they suffered early on, and it means that the next adopters are not starting from scratch. As we move to the idea of participation, interoperability is at the heart of the community's thesis on financial inclusion. We have seen the consequences of the isolated closed-loop solutions and benefit of ubiquitous access and open systems. Interoperability is really nothing without the participating financial institutions and payment providers being connected and able to operate the service in a sustainable manner. We cannot have Mojaloop in the center. It's useless, right? We need to have everybody connecting easily. So how do we make sure that that happens? Our experience, we had lots of support onboarding the first organizations to get them to do real transfers. And this gave us first-hand experience of some of the complexities of the security model, challenges in connecting to an asynchronous API from some of the legacy platforms that the financial institutions had. Inclusion would not benefit from insisting that all organizations needed a certain grade or quality of their core platform. That would be defeating some of our purposes. So together with the financial institutions, the hub operating partners, we've been involving adjacent solutions and technologies to the actual core system that allows for that onboarding and participation. Payment Manager is what we call that in the community now. And it provides a standardized onboarding experience. It works alongside another technology called Connection Manager at the hub, which helps the onboarding process and key management. The key elements of of our Payment Manager approach was to reduce the participation costs, or rather increase participation efficiency. We were trying to make sure we had a modular solution here, so community members could use the components they needed. For example, a financial institution using a Sybrin or Ericsson core might natively support Mojaloop. But they may want to leverage some of the connector components for managing some of the security features. Sorry, Greg, you guys may actually have done that already yourselves, but the point is we wanted to be there as a tool, and we did take the team through that. It needs to be complete, so there are no hidden costs. There are no tariff barriers for small FIs to actually onboard into the system. It's really important that we can actually, that the system is open and there aren't these artificial barriers. We have to reduce the onboarding friction. That onboarding integration, that initial engineering effort and the associated business effort that goes into it is a challenge. And we really want to make sure that we've reduced that friction for both the financial institutions doing it and the hub operators. We work with many other networks, real-time networks, and it often takes months and months to get onboarded into a platform. And in some cases, there's fees charged by the hub operator to actually do that, or the real-time payment network operator to actually do that onboarding exercise and get support. These are things which are not mission aligned. Transparency and observability. We really want to make sure that we allow the local resolution. If you have an issue in your institution sending a transfer, you need to be able to resolve it yourself. You need to know you had an issue. You have to be able to look, see, and do that easily without having a PhD in Mojaloop. And actually be able to just understand what's going on and quickly address any issue. Or if you do phone the hub, make sure you're phoning them because there's a real problem, or at least the problem is not on your side. And make sure we have reconciliation support. And that gives us an understanding of where things may have gone wrong. And of course, there's the issue always of how you deploy and operate this. And the solution we're working on here is something that's appropriate for on-prem deployments, and as well as for cloud-native modes of operation. Financial institutions notice the costs of onboarding. But these are once-off costs. They spikes, disappear into the dust. The real issue comes for the participation costs. When you're running, those ongoing costs need to remain low. The number of times you have to pick up a call or customer phones you to say, I have a problem, or the number of times you have to speak to the central RTP provider to say, please help resolve it. Those are the times that you worry about it or in trouble. So I'll make a point here of saying there are some perceived complexities with the Mojaloop onboarding process, and some of those have a certain amount of technical expertise, but we're actually simplifying those through some of these contributions. And those particular things are there for a really good reason. It's because they help us not minimize the onboarding effort, but minimize the ongoing participation risks. And that helps drive down the cost. So what's the status? I can see Simeon's busy pinging people and directing them. So the quick update on the status, we did announce that the solution was being fully open sourced at the last convening, the technical convening. Simeon is busy helping us go through the process of actually adopting it into a community, because a good community has this characteristic of not being a place people go and dump code on or dump things on. He's smiling at me, because that's not right. That's not doing the right thing for us or for the rest of the members. So, but this, so we've open sourced it first as ModusBox, but it's in GitHub. There's documentation. There's a lot of information out there. So please go and have a look at that. Simeon is helping us, as I said, do the transition to actually bring it into the Mojaloop repos. But don't wait for that effort, please. Like you can see, there are lots of other organizations already contributing to it. So this is a really, really important part of our initiative to actually grow the adoption, and for Mojaloop to have an effect and reach its mission, we need to help those organizations to get onboarded onto it. Now, in just the last minute, part of this is about, okay, so open source contributions, why are we doing it? And I think Greg summarized a lot of the key points really well. As a community, we understand and believe in the mission of financial inclusion. Interoperability, we believe, is that next disruptive step. But we believe that actually working together as a community, rather than just one company or sometimes two companies working together, means we can get better real-world solutions that meet our real user needs. And with an open model, we just make it the natural way that anybody, any organization can actually participate and join in this initiative. You don't need to be a tier one bank to be able to join a Mojaloop enabled system, assuming the scheme rules allow, et cetera, et cetera. It's a topic for another conversation. But it's about democratizing that process. It's about making sure everybody can have a seat at the table. And that means if you're doing 10 transactions a day, or if you're doing 2,000 transactions per second, when it comes to doing those interoperable transfers, we want you to be able to play. So it's about all classes of financial institutions actually being able to participate. Sustainability is an issue, though. In our product breakout room, Stephen pointed out, what's the business case? Interoperability is about efficiency. The market shows us that low friction real-time payment solutions can drive volumes and services, not just financial services like insurance or loans but purchases even for energy and retail goods, all things that are happening now with mobile money systems just as much as they are with credit card systems. But who remembers when mobile phones only worked with their own networks? I do. I friends installing them in South Africa, and if you were on Vodacom, you were on Vodacom. That was it. You didn't speak to MTN, right? It didn't actually all happen on day one that everybody was connected. And then when mobile broadband came about, we had walled gardens for a time. Actually, as a community, we are slow to learn, and I think Willie said something about the old becoming new and the new becoming old again. So there are these cycles. Historically, mobile money businesses were actually focused on cross-border. Turns out that was because nobody could see how much money was, or how many transactions were happening in the domestic transfers. The value and number of transactions powered by those flip-flops that Costa showed us at the beginning was incredible, and people just weren't really appreciating it. So really, we have a thesis here that actually we don't want to hold on to proprietary software. We believe that to get the scale we need in the ecosystem, we can actually have a much wider ecosystem, a shared responsibility for maintaining that ecosystem. And as per other open source models, there's been it's well understood that there's enterprise support that can be provided to organizations that need it and benefit from it, that actually allow us to provide and manage some of the risks and systemic risks in providing these kind of systems. So, and even in that process, ModusBox doesn't see us doing that alone. We believe in joint partnerships, kind of semi-like reseller agreements of old, where actually by working with partners like ThitsaWorks and that, we can actually give local support to SIs in countries busy doing the onboarding for people, busy supporting their customer bases. So it's the combination of all of these things. It is a community effort that will get us to change the world. So I think that gives me my that's the end of my soapbox. But I actually Leslie Ann shared with us a great talk from one of the Finos podcasts. We have Finos here with us on this conference, but there were really some good ideas about thinking about when it's good, maybe when you should or when you shouldn't contribute to open source. What kind of projects work, what kind of projects don't. If we have time, Simeon, we can maybe think a little bit about some of those questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Warren and Greg, for your thoughts. One of the things that I do want to highlight is about contribution. Most of what you referred to, Warren and Greg, as organizations have focused on the technical aspects, but I know both of you are also involved in other non-technical aspects. And maybe I'll throw that one back to you, because we have a number of business folks here who I'm sure would be more than happy to contribute in some way. That perhaps may not. And so I'm thinking, Greg, you want to go first and just answer that?
So as an embedded research group in the department.
So I hear some background noise. Greg,
sharing that as well. Sorry. Yeah. No. Yeah. For example, one of the things that I have noticed, we're all very focused on the central switches because we get the most, inclusivity, bang for the buck, there. But some of the opportunities that we're finding that actually help business wise is actually going to the banks and helping them. This South African bank that we're working with has a mission of reaching out to 100 million people and aid them with inclusivity across Africa. And so getting to be part of that, putting the Mojaloop switch up in there, helping them work bank to bank across their territories lowers the cost in their system. And I've actually worked with that organization to get the cost of remittance down to basically what the World Bank wanted for a target for right now, which is 3%, where we're averaging like over 8% on average in Kenya, for example. So these things are coming from unexpected places, in non-planned places, and I think we need to be open to that. The other thing is we're looking at. I had never thought about this. Somebody brought this to me and said we're interested in doing a regional-wide merchant payment system that is actually hosted centrally by the government. And fortunately, we're in a position where we can help with that now. We've got this new sister company, Payout, that's one of the largest aggregators of payments and billing systems and bill presentment and things like that. I don't know if that will go anywhere, but that's a unique innovation on top of things like this, right? It's not just the ability to add merchants into a system, but it's how do we do centrally controlled merchants across everything. It's like one of the hardest parts of cards, which is an area we choose not to work in, but it is actually central management of the card issuance and going across systems and things like that. This would alleviate that on the case of merchants and QR codes and cash out at till and coupon at till and all those types of things, which we're now fortunate that we should be able to bring forward into the community as well. That's going to be one of the next big things that we take up is how do we couple that into the Mojaloop framework and the Mojaloop world. And the Forex was probably, yes, it was something that people wanted to do, but it wasn't necessarily a primary focus area, but yet the cost of remittance is horrible. And so, hopefully we win this one project for it. If not, I'm going to have to find other money. But I've got this vision of what I call FX Loop, which is an Africa Loop, Mojaloop for doing remittance processing. So I think the business opportunities are vast. You need to find what's your niche or what you can go after. Your niche may not be, your niche may just be a regional thing, a regional play because it's needed. Your niche could be a whole new business model. This is a great framework to work with. It's adaptable and flexible. We've got a lot of stuff going on that we'll start sharing with the world here pretty quick. We've been building out all of our demo systems, what we call the Iron Bank, named after the the Game of Thrones thing. But yeah, it's quite exciting. And Mifos, by the way, thank you. We actually use your core banking app and to set up all of our banks and simulate our banks within the demo environment and the dev environment. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Greg. Warren, I'll throw the question to you. What non-technical contributions are, from where you sit, what other contributions are possible from ModusBox perspective?
Well, I think that there are three types of contributions that I'm closest to, and a fourth I'm a little further away from. So firstly, we have lots of ideas in the community around use cases and scenarios and actual product services and offerings. So for instance, Finn will talk about this tomorrow. Then he represents Thitsaworks, who is leading a system called WinePay in Myanmar. And that is actually focusing on MFI loan repayment services through the platform. And what we're seeing is and in our original specification for Mojaloop, there is actually a section where it says, yeah, the 8 transaction types we think you can do, blah, blah, blah. And it gives you some details. But actually what we need is that's great technical diagrams, sequence diagrams for the technical teams. What we need to make sure is that there's some great kind of business storyboards out there. And this is, I'm just repeating a plea I hear from the product council, from Leslie Ann asking in the community, actually, can we make sure that we actually wrap up those ideas, those scenarios, so that there are examples of what good looks like for people to adopt. So people don't start every project by saying, hey, let's decide how we're going to design the P2P scenario. Actually, the P2P scenario is pretty well designed. There are a few key things, a few things about identity, a few things about, or there might be some regulatory nuances, but actually we could do so much more for accelerating the adoption by the business folks who ultimately make the decision about going or no go on these kind of programs, if we can actually speak their language. Then next, it's the both. If you're able to persuade the CEO that there's something good there for them and that they want to be part of such a system, or the central bank that this is something that's going to work for their country, you then have to be able to persuade everybody what is the cost to actually operate a system. So just recently, in partnership with all the organizations we've been involved with before, and with some funding from Gates on this, we've been working together with them to distill some of the documents and business operations processes and framework, and both technical operations and business operation documents, which I think are even live on the sites at the moment. But again, let's, as a community, keep contributing into those spaces and refining them, because they're not static, and as things evolve, those need to be changed as well. These are, open source contributions. A good idea is not that they are finished. I think we call them projects for a reason, and that's because we expect continual evolution. So those are kind of the three areas I'm very interested in. I also think that the business model for running a solution, and this we've helped support work both by national banks or the national payments directorate in countries to actually work through what those are going to look like. I know there's a lot of initiatives within the Mojaloop community, but actually just thinking through about how do we present those business cases? How do we make sure that we don't have to start from scratch? I know Elizabeth was here from Glenbrook, one of the partners in this space. And I think that's really valuable work that's happening to actually be able to drive adoption. One of the questions you have to have is, and it's to my participation pieces, it's not about actually getting onboarded. It's not about deploying the system. It's not about getting started with it. It's making sure you can run the system and service in a sustainable way.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Warren, and Greg, for your feedback. I want to bring this to a close, but I also want to say a big thank you to Sam for highlighting some very useful information, the Mojaloop business operations documentation. It's a recently refreshed page, which I think is very exciting.